minimum, the naysayers can come out one way or the other. He's your quarterback in 2020. I mean, that's already established, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. There are a whole lot of situations in this league where people are going, is this guy someone we can trust going into 2020? That's not Minnesota's situation. And I think at the start of the year, Murph, that was kind of the question. Is this going to be so disastrous that you kind of got to eat that third year just to put yourself in a position to make the best of the situation you have with the weapons that you've signed? Now we're going, it is Kirk Cousins' team. This is his show. And everybody, whether you're on the bandwagon or not, this is what you get. We'll see how he performs in the final game.
And you're starting to hear the chatter about he's already halfway through the deal. What about an extension?
Yeah.
Is that something you go out on a limb and do? I say no. I mean, I don't think it's asking, considering how much they've guaranteed to him.
Yeah.
I don't think it's asking too much to see him perform in January before you even entertain the idea of extending him beyond 2020. Now, that he got treated that way in Washington year after year where they franchised it, right. But he's been rewarded enough where I think the Vikings can protect themselves as long as they can on this investment and see how he performs in the postseason, assuming he gets to the postseason, which it looks like it's pretty good now. And like you said, if he does this against Seattle, their schedule sets up really well.
It's wild.
you got home games against Detroit and Chicago, and
which one of those are going to be a weird game, right? Detroit always. It's always something weird with them.
Well, if there's
Chicago.
something at stake against Chicago, week 17. And you're probably looking at Chase Daniel, who carved them up earlier this season. I don't think you're going to see Trubisky.
No.
Probably by that point. And then you got a road game against the Chargers, who don't impress me much. But it's another night game, and you're flying all the way out there. That's a wild card too. So, but it's not in the least a forbid. The Seattle game is the end of the meat grinder portion of their schedule, which they've been in now for a couple of weeks.
13-3 seems feasible. I mean, if you get by Seattle, certainly.
And everything on riding on the Green Bay game at home. Yep. I mean, the division will be clinched that night.
Now you're talking home field advantage.
And that's
potentially
big.
if you get in that situation.
Big for him, probably, Cousins.
I mean, you want Kirk Cousins to have an opportunity to play at home, right? Going on the road, we all know the stats and the numbers. You don't want to put him in that situation if you can avoid it. But I will say in terms of the extension, I don't think you have to rush that because you're about to pay Dalvin Cook. Who I thought they should have paid earlier this year because his price tag just keeps going up. But with Dalvin, Thielen, Diggs, Rudolph, young Irv Smith, who gets better and better every week, I think there are other guys you could put in Kirk Cousins' situation, and they would be effective and efficient. I think if you're the Vikings, you know that you've got, I think, the best skilled players in the NFL. I mean, who has a better set of tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs in the league?
Depth.
I mean, who has that? There aren't many teams that can say they can match that. But I would hold off. Let's see what happens this year. Now, if he makes a run to the Super Bowl, even the NFC Championship game, I think you give him that extension.
Because his price is going up that way too.
Definitely. But right now, I don't think that's something you have to address. And again, if they get blown out by Seattle, we're going to be right back to,
of course,
what if? What's going to happen with this team? Because, Murph, I don't think getting to the playoffs and losing early, right? That does nothing. That's not a successful season.
Nope. Been there, done that.
Even if you win a game and you get destroyed after that, that's not a successful season. You got to do what you did in Dallas consistently in the playoffs. That still remains the question. That's what they paid for. That's who they signed all these pieces for.
And that's what this market is invested for right
100%.
now. I mean, we've talked about it before. You can talk about the 4 Super Bowl losses, but that's ancient history. They're 0-6 in NFC Championship games since then, and including some in the last 10 years, they've had 2 awful losses.
Yes.
So getting to the NFC Championship game is not even going to be that fulfilling. They need to cross that barrier finally.
Yeah. Get
to the big game. I think granted, if you get to the Super Bowl, your ultimate goal, of course, is to win it. But I think there would be a huge level of there'd be a weight lifted off of fans and the franchise crossing that bridge into the Super Bowl and putting themselves in a position to compete for a championship for the first time in 45 years after so many painful losses in the NFC Championship game. And they're probably going to have to put it in the hands of their quarterback, because what you don't want to do is put it in the hands of a kicker.
Yeah, no, you don't want to
not
be in
here.
That position. No,
not anytime soon in a big game.
Position. No, but Dalvin Cook, having a guy like that, having a game breaker like that opens up everything. That's the thing. The skill players are so good they're going to have a chance. But I also think that, this is a team where we talk a lot about Minnesota. The rest of the NFC, there's no power. I mean, there's no team where you go, oh my goodness. It's the Kurt Warner's LA Rams,
there's
or
no Patriots.
It's the Cowboys of the mid-90s. I mean, there's no team like that. I mean, San Francisco, really good defense. Do you trust Jimmy Garoppolo in the postseason? Yes, Russell Wilson has been very good. Isn't surrounded by a ton of skilled players. Jadeveon Clowney has enhanced that defense, but that defense hasn't been great all year. Green Bay is a team where we've seen Green Bay look really good. We've also seen them lose to Philly. Like there have been a number of moments with these, and to LA, where these teams, and you go, okay, they've got high ceilings, much like the Vikings, but we also know how low that floor can go. And I don't think there's any juggernaut in the playoff picture right now in the NFC, which should make Vikings fans feel good. They can go out and beat anybody among the teams they would see in the playoffs.
Well, and you talked about home field advantage. You would certainly want it. You don't want to go to Lambeau in January. You don't want to go to New Orleans ever.
Don't want to go to Seattle.
You do not want to go back to Seattle. Nope. So if you're gonna limp in as a wild card, I don't know if you have to go to San Francisco. That doesn't seem very foreboding.
Yeah.
They've already won in Dallas.
Yep.
I wouldn't feel too bad about going there, but you do not want to have to be outdoors in Green Bay, indoors in New Orleans, and out west in Seattle again. So home field does come into play huge.
And like you said, if you get that and you go on a run, you beat Seattle and you win the next 5 games, you're there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got that spot, and that could change everything, because I think the Vikings at home are a Super Bowl team. Even if they've got to go play one game at San Francisco, at New Orleans, they still have a chance, a really good chance, I think. And we just watched the Saints lose to the Atlanta Falcons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
at home.
Yeah, there's just no team that makes you go, they're unbeatable. And I think the Vikings would be in a great position in that situation. On the road, who do they beat? On the road, in the playoff, everything attached to that, you can see them losing and losing by a touchdown or two in that scenario, whether it's Seattle, whether it's Dallas, New Orleans. So I think home field advantage is a huge thing, winning these next 4 to 5 of these next 5 games. But I think Seattle will set the tone, because if you get blown out at Seattle, now we're right back to, can you do this consistently, which remains the question.
And it remains a question for Cousins, but it also does for their defense.
100%.
Because we haven't talked about that, and it's almost a tale of two defenses. I mean, You look at their interior and their linebackers, and you go, that's the strength of it, obviously. They're still a top 5 unit. But on the back end, they're a mess.
Yeah.
They're not consistent. Xavier Rhodes is a shell of his former self. Now you got Harrison Smith nursing a hamstring from the other day. Kept Thielen down for 3 weeks. That's going to be worth monitoring. Mike Hughes, teams have identified as somebody they're going to go after.
Yeah.
Trey Waynes can be a playmaker, but he's been soft as well. And this is Zimmer's baby, right? He came up through the ranks as a defensive backs coach. Mm-hmm. He's often seen dressing him down on the sidelines, and he hasn't been too kind about Xavier since training camp.
And he shouldn't be. I mean,
I agree.
Been good.
No, and then I think that hip is still bothering him to a degree, and probably won't let on about it. But he's not the same player he has been in the past. So if they go out to Seattle and get picked apart, now you're going to have not only questions about Cousins, but the suspect defense that gave up 20 points at home to Denver and fell behind and can't. You
can't be in that situation in the playoffs. You can't be in that situation against a good team. And Denver's not a good team, and they're in that scenario. So if anyone's going to pick you apart too, it's Russell Wilson.
Yes.
Who has the throw of the year. I mean, the throw he had on Thursday Night Football a few weeks back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he is one of those guys who, if you've got a weakness, he'll find it, to your point. And I think this thing is shifting a little bit in that, what Kirk Cousins is, how explosive that offense can be, even if it's not consistent. Do you trust this defense to make a big play at the end of a game? If this thing comes down to a close game and it's not Kirk Cousins, if it's in that defense's hands, do you trust him?
Now, they did Sunday at the very last stand. They made 3 defensive stops.
Making up for what they didn't do.
So they break even as far as we're concerned, right? We talked about maybe grading them out as an overall grade just before we went on. Letter grades, you can make a case for a lot of them. I'm just going to go B-, and I'm going to go minus.
Okay, you're a hard, tough grader, man.
Well, because I expected this to be a 12 12-win team. And
Yeah.
I think it still can be. But I don't like the way the defense has played. Cousins, I'm starting to come around on, but the bar is high here. This is the Super Bowl window. They have a lot of explaining to do for 8-7-1. So the biggest game of the year is their next one.
Yeah.
So the B- can become an A very quickly. And it can be a C- if they lose too. So I'm sorry. I've been around too long. I've bought in too much. I expect it to happen within the next year, or I don't see it happening at all.
No, the window is, I mean, this is the window, right? I mean, you've got to perform now. B- I definitely understand. I would say a B+.
Okay.
Only because, if you're 8-3 going into the bye, you got a chance. Kirk has been solid. Dalvin, Diggs, and what he's been able to do. And the defense collectively, they've been a top 10 group. Why they're not an A- to me, and not in that conversation, is the best teams in the league are opportunistic in that they will crush an inferior opponent. And Minnesota has not done that. We've seen that now Chicago's not really a good team, and they couldn't beat that team. You go to Kansas City, and Patrick Mahomes is not playing. The MVP of the league, maybe the best quarterback in the league, is not playing. You have to destroy Matt Moore. You have an opportunity against the Denver Broncos where it's right there. You just beat a Dallas team that might be a playoff team. You just went on the road and shocked the world. You've got to stomp on that team, and they didn't do it. They're down 20-0. To me, the thing you admire about the Patriots when they've been at their best, the thing you admire about some of these dominant franchises we've witnessed throughout the history of the NFL is they will pounce on you and show no mercy. This is still a team that it's almost as if they adjust their level of competition, how competitive they're going to be based on the team they're facing. And I said this to Collar. I think the Vikings would have been better off playing the Chiefs with Mahomes because I think mentally they would have been different. Like, this is just a team where you can't tell them there's a gimme.
Yeah, and they let Matt Moore beat them.
You can't tell them there's a 4-foot putt to win the Open. You know what I mean? You've got to tell them that, hey, everybody's going to be available. There's going to be a really difficult game because if you tell them it's going to be easy, they just don't know how to function in that scenario. So I'm still waiting for that dominant performance that reminds you, okay, this is how good they can be, and this is how they can show you that, okay, they're on a certain level. Denver was that opportunity. Kansas City was that opportunity. Chicago, and they failed in all those cases, in my opinion.
Well, after Seattle, they got Detroit rolling into town, and they're mailing it in. So that should be an opportunity at home to stomp on an inferior opponent. Brian Murphy in for Matthew Collar. Myron Metcalf is here as well from ESPN. Fred Cox, the Vikings' all-time leading scorer, former place kicker, one of only 11 members on all 4 Super Bowl teams of the 1970s, passed away yesterday at the age of 80. He had been battling some recent illness. Not only one of the great Vikings greats, but a great human being, but also one of the inventors of the Nerf football. Joining us after the break will be my former colleague at the Pioneer Press, Chris Thomason, who wrote a nice feature story and obituary on Fred Cox in today, up on TwinCities.com. It'll be in the newspaper on Sunday. We'll talk to Chris about Fred Cox's legacy and an interview he had with Fred just as recently as Saturday about his career and that Nerf football invention. This is Brian Murphy and Myron Metcalf on Purple Daily on Score North.
You're listening to Purple Daily, where you always get 25 straight minutes of Vikings talk, twice an hour, between 2 and 4 p.m. every weekday.
Unbelievable.
Good talk.
Skol! On Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Yep, the season's over, but we're already on to the next. Last winter, the Twins added over 100 bombas in free agency. What will they do this winter? We're already salivating. Let the speculation begin on the Score North Twins Show. With contributors like Patrick Royce and Glenn Perkins. We talk Twins. The Score North Twins Show. Available on demand on Apple, Spotify, and the Score North mobile app.
If you love the idea of a brand new home, but don't love the idea of waiting for it to be built, you're in luck. MI Homes has brand new townhomes, single-family homes, and one-level villas throughout the Twin Cities that are move-in ready right now. Located in great communities in some of the area's most sought-after neighborhoods, MI Homes are built to the highest quality standards with the amenities you want most. And all you have to do is move, live, and love. See all the available homes online at mihomes.com.
It's time for some straight talk. You know those football players who are all talk, no show? Well, big wireless carriers aren't much different. Well, Straight Talk Wireless doesn't give you the hype, just the savings. For just $45 a month, you'll get the unlimited plan with 25 gigs of high-speed data, then 2G. No contract. All on the same 4G LTE networks as the big guys, but up to half the cost. Savings delivered right to your wallet. Only at Walmart. Savings may vary. See terms and conditions at straighttalk.com.
Progressive presents Get Pumped. Inspiration to help you do insurance stuff.
Hey, are you just going to stand there and let people not give you credit for being a good driver? You deserve discounts on car insurance, and that's what Snapshot from Progressive is for. So why aren't you signing up? You need music to get pumped? Hit it! Drum solo! Ow, that hurts my fingers.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Snapshot not available in California, North Carolina, or from all agents.
At the 1955 Rose Bowl, Goodyear began providing stunning aerial coverage of college football, forever changing the way the game is experienced. In recognition of its significant contribution, the Goodyear blimp is being inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame as an honorary member. It's the first non-player or coach to ever be inducted. Goodyear is celebrating this honor by reminding you to look forward and make sure you're prepared for the road ahead. Discover more at Goodyear.com. Goodyear, more driven.
No. This can't be it.
Mike, your team's in the lead. They just scored.
No, you don't understand. This is the last Cheez-It.
There's...
No, listen, I don't know what to do. The game's on. The score is close. There's plenty of drinks to go around. But what's the point if there's no Cheez-It snacks?
Man, if you would just...
The cheesy, crunchy, satisfying perfection. It's all gone after this. Thank you, my little delicious square.
Dude, there's more in the kitchen.
I love you.
You're still talking to the cracker, aren't you?
Cheez-It, official sponsor of the college football playoff.
This is Josh Arnold, Mr. Money Talk. You have protection. You have insurance for your car, your house, your health, maybe even your life. But do you have protection for your 401k or IRA? Why not call me, Josh Arnold, Mr. Money Talk, at 952-925-5608 to discuss ways that you can protect your portfolio. You know, with all the volatility in the market, with the Federal Reserve, and Trump's tweets on tariffs and trade, you're going to need a steady hand and a good asset allocation model to carry you through these volatile times. You'll always get straight talk, not sugar-coated advice. Call me, Josh Arnold, 952-925-5608.
Investment advisor services offered by Josh Arnold Investment Consultant, LLC, a registered advisor in the state of Minnesota. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investments involve risk. Raise your frosty mug. Listen to The Beer Show every Thursday night at 6. Join Elevated Beer, Wine, and Spirits as they make a beer run with a different special guest from the craft beer scene. The Beer Show, Thursday nights at 6.
How to like beer.
On Score North.
For binge watching, for movie night, for streaming apps, for gamers.
I never seen anything like it.
It's the powerful performance, premium picture, and stunning resolution of TCL's award-winning smart TVs. TCL, America's fastest growing TV brand, powering the studios of Score North. You're listening to Purple Daily, where you always get 25 straight minutes of Vikings talk, twice an hour, between 2 and 4 p.m. every weekday.
Unbelievable.
Good talk. Skol! On Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Score North download time. Jonathan here with this hour's download. You can download the Score North mobile app and make sure you register for listening rewards, because this month one lucky app user will win a $200 Visa gift card just for having the Score North mobile app. All you have to do is download the app, register the app, and enter through listening rewards, and you have your chance to win a $200 Visa gift card just for having the free Score North mobile app. Stephon Diggs on Good Morning Football yesterday asked about Cousins, his quarterback, as an MVP candidate. Here's what he had to say about that.
I feel like he has a case.
My case earlier was, Dalvin Cook.
Oh yeah.
But Kirk Cousins playing lights out right now. You can't dispute it. You can't go against it. He had a comeback this past weekend, and people want to go against him, but at this point he's playing well. What you gonna say about it? My guy for a while was Dalvin Cook. Still is my guy.
Yeah.
Underneath the table, don't say that.
Yeah.
Because he's a special player. I feel like he's a special player. He can do everything. And what was that night against the Cowboys? He shined.
Now back to Purple Daily.
Fred Cox proved adept at many things. He was Vikings place kicker from 1963 to 77. Remains their all-time leading scorer with 1,365 points. When he retired, he was second in NFL history at the time with 282 field goals. Then he earned a chiropractic degree, and he had a successful practice for about 16 years after he had retired. And then in 1972, he signed a contract with Parker Brothers that has no expiration date. And he helped create the Nerf football. And checks have continued to roll in every year for as much as $200,000 to $400,000 a year. So Cox, who passed away yesterday at the age of 80 after a short illness, was an interesting character, to say the least, and one of the Vikings all-time greats. Joining me now is my former colleague at the Pioneer Press and TwinCities.com, Chris Thomason. Chris, you wrote about Fred. It's up on the website today, sort of a lengthy profile and obituary. It'll be in the Sunday newspaper. What do you think ultimately Fred Cox's legacy is?
There's not too many people who have been so successful in so many different fields as Fred Cox. Here he was, one of the best kickers in the NFL during his period. I know it's a totally different era, and people might look at his stats now and go, what? But back in the day, he was all pro one year, Pro Bowl another year. And he gravitates from that to being a successful chiropractor. He had a booming business that, as you mentioned, was open for about 16 years in Buffalo, Minnesota. And not only that, he's the guy who invented the Nerf football. So, or at least was one of the inventors of the Nerf football. So, some people, I noticed there was, I think it was the ESPN.com website, the headline of his passing was ex-Vikings kicker. Inventor of the Nerf football, Fred Cox died. So, he had that going as well. So, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I had a chance to sit down just last Saturday, 6 days ago, and talk to him at length.
How did that interview come about?
Well, I'd reached out to I'd reached out on his cell phone to touch base with him on an article. I didn't know that his health was bad, and then a relative ends up texting me back saying, well, Fred's in hospice care right now. And this was probably about a week and a half ago that I heard back. Fred's in hospice care right now. And, but he has some good days and some bad days, and he might be willing to talk to you. And I'm like, well, that's very interesting. So I reached out to the family and then was told, well, do you want to do the interview in person or on the phone? I said, well, I'd be honored to go out and meet Fred and talk to him. I had spoken to him on the phone several occasions for stories, but had never actually met him. So I went out to the house in Monticello where he lives, and it's actually a pretty modest house. Here's a guy who made millions and millions in his life, and checks from Nerf coming in $400,000 a year, $200,000 virtually every year. But he had given a lot of his money away over the years to charitable endeavors and to a local church. So they first said, you have 20 minutes to talk to him, but I talked to Fred for about 45 minutes, and he was, we talked about his entire life. And if you read the article, a very courageous man. He pretty much was saying, hey, I know my time is done, but nobody's lived more of a life than I have. And he even kind of in a semi-joking manner talked about his pastor having come by the other day, and they were preparing for his funeral. So it was very interesting talking to somebody who'd had such a great life, and they knew their life was soon about to end. It wasn't known at the point that it would end as quickly as it did. I mean, I didn't, from seeing him last Saturday, I mean, he joked about whether he would still be around at Christmas time, and that, in my mind, I was thinking maybe that was more of the time frame. And then I had checked with his wife on Sunday, and she said he had a great day last Sunday and apparently the early part of Monday, but I talked to her yesterday, and apparently he just took a turn for the worse on Monday and then died by Wednesday night.
He played from the early 60s until the late 70s when so many changes unfolded in the NFL. What did he have to say about that? Just so the evolution of the game that he witnessed from the start of his career to the end.
Well, a couple of points on that. I asked him about, I mean, he was a conventional style, toe style kicker, and he said Norm Van Brocklin, his first coach, wouldn't even let him use a kicking shoe. So he had to kick, I guess, with a regular cleat. And finally, at least when Bud Grant came in 1967, he let him wear a kicking shoe. So he improved after that. And I mean, it was a completely different era. I mean, he was talking about as a kicker kicking off, one of the key things he had to do was get down the field as fast as he could because he was one of the guys who was going to help break the wedge. I mean, they expected him to be as much of a tackler as any of the other 10 guys on the kickoff team. And then we talked about field conditions and kicking outside at Metropolitan Stadium. I mean, he would hear the wind outside in the morning of the game and go, oh, and so he said he nearly got chills, and then he would go out and the weather would be freezing, and he said it was like kicking a chunk of ice, how hard the balls were sometimes.
What he didn't start out as a kicker in college. How did he become a kicker?
Well, he was always a kicker and an all-around type athlete growing up in suburban Pittsburgh. And at the University of Pittsburgh, he was a star running back, and but he was just a better kicker than that. He actually, I mean, I didn't get into the story, but it's documented. He actually got drafted or first joined Cleveland, and they had Lou the Toe Groza, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest kickers ever. So he wasn't going to make that team, and so he gets cut, and then he actually joined the Vikings. And the first year he got cut with the Vikings, rosters were 38 players at that stage, and they had Mike Mercer, who was the first kicker in Vikings history in '61, who was and also was the punter. So they wanted to use him for both roles. So roster spots were at a premium. So he actually got cut, and then it occurred to them, I think, that Mike Mercer wasn't the answer. So they brought in Cox in his rookie year, '63. He actually kicked and punted, and he admitted he was a terrible punter. If you look at his stats, he averaged like 37, 38 yards a punt. So then they finally, he was exclusively a kicker his second year, and they brought in another punter, Bobby Walden.
Chris Thomason of the Pioneer Press writing today online and in Sunday's paper about Fred Cox, the Vikings all-time leading scorer, longtime place kicker who passed away yesterday after a brief illness and at his home in Monticello. And Thomason, Chris here had a chance to talk to Fred on Saturday to kind of talk about his career and his life. So Nerf, how did this all evolve and start?
Well, he said John Maddox, this guy that he knew, showed up at his door one day and said he had an interesting concept and he wanted to talk to him about it. And he wanted to kind of have like a goalpost and a football for kids. He had the goalpost, and he was thinking of something or other for a ball. And he wanted to be kind of heavier, or at least like a regular football. And Fred was like, well, you do that, there's going to be a lot of sore-legged kids out there. I mean, you can't have them kicking a regular ball. So he said, you got to have something foam and all of that. And so they ended up going to an injection molder in the Twin Cities and had somebody come up with. They made 6 balls. I think they actually made a first one and it was way too heavy, and they came back and then they made another. And Fred's like, okay, this looks pretty good. And they gave it to the local kids. He was living in Edina at the time to play with it for the next 2 weeks. And they were worried that it would all get scuffed up and everything. But the guy did such a great job that 2 weeks later, the ball was still in great shape. So then they went off to Parker Brothers, which had been trying to come up with a Nerf football type deal that was suitable. And they show up and they bring out this giant box with all these prototypes of balls that they've been trying to make and say, we've been trying to do this for 2 years, but we've never come up with a ball like yours. Yours is perfect. And they pretty much signed him to a contract right there in the spot.
When he talks about, obviously, he has this amazing legacy. What moment in his football career really stood out? I mean, what was the moment where, he was really proud of both what he and his team had achieved?
In terms of football, he kind of admitted that he played football for a living. And, he said he doesn't look back a lot, but he does look back. And, yeah, I guess I was pretty good. I scored a lot of points, but he doesn't fawn over his football career. And I think maybe one reason is because he was so successful in other walks of life. In 1974, he said he wanted to quit because he could make double the amount of money as a chiropractor, maybe about $100,000 than he did as a kicker, $50,000. But Bud Grant convinced him to hang on for 3 more years, and to groom the successor to him, who was Rich Danmeyer, who was one of the last straight-on kickers. I think the last ones in NFL history. Mark Mosley was the last one, and before that it was Danmeyer. So he reluctantly kind of hung on to groom this guy, but there's not a lot of Vikings paraphernalia, or there wasn't in his house when I was there. He did have on the wall kind of a signed frame thing of 11 of the 11 players who had played in all 4 Viking Super Bowls, but he said that was more of a reminder of the camaraderie. So probably his highlights in football were more so the camaraderie of the teammates and the friends that he made, maybe versus the actual games.
Did he ever have any, defining winning kicks or misses over his career?
Basically, I mean, I don't know if he had any super dramatic kicks that I could think of, but the Vikings, if you look back on some of their scores, I think like back in 71 or 72, they beat the Packers 3-0, and they had such a dominant defense back then that one field goal maybe would be enough to win the game, because the Viking defense was so dominant back then in the late 60s, early 70s.
Well, Chris, since we have you here, we were talking at the top of the hour, just sort of Vikings at the state of the Vikings at the bye. They're 8-3. Obviously, they're not playing this weekend. What are you looking forward to, or what are you looking most at as they come out of the bye that may shape their destiny here the rest of the season? What do you think's going to really need to happen, or that what do they have to create to have happen? What do you think it's going to have to be?
Well, this Seattle game right out of the gates, I mean, you cannot overestimate the importance of this Seattle game a week from Monday. I mean, this could determine their entire season. If they beat Seattle in Seattle to go to 9-3, I mean, all of a sudden this is a team that's contending to potentially have a bye and position themselves for a long playoff run. If they lose to Seattle, then they're probably, the odds are they're in that number 5 or number 6 spot, because right now, I mean, the Packers play the 49ers on Sunday. That'll be a key game. But if the Packers keep winning, the Vikings cannot control their own destiny, because even if they beat the Packers December 23rd, Monday night game, the Packers are still the odds-on favorite to win the tiebreaker, because they have no division losses and the Vikings have 2. So this Seattle game is absolutely huge for playoff positioning.
And lastly, Kirk Cousins. You've seen him play every game here. You've known sort of the ups and the downs and how people are judging him. Where do you think he sits right now as the solution to the Vikings quarterback ills, and then just as in terms of galvanizing the locker room as sort of the guy?
Well, I mean, you can't deny the job that he's done since the start of October. I mean, who knows what got into him? There was a lot of same old Kurt back in September. He underwhelmed in games at Green Bay, at Chicago. They lost them, and all kinds of criticism. And then he's just taken off like wildfire. I mean, some of it, granted, has been against lousy teams, but winning the Dallas game was obviously huge for him. He had a bit of a setback the previous week against Kansas City, so you're thinking same old Kirk. But, I mean, he's still going to have scrutiny. This Seattle game coming